Wait, are you are you gonna count me in? Whatever. I'm just gonna go for it. Welcome to the Queen's Lead podcast. I'm your host, Amy Singleton, and as a child of the 80s, I'd love to say queens rule, but they don't. Queens lead. Being a queen means you are worthy to be a leader of people. The guests on our show do exactly that. They are leading the way in their businesses, families, and communities. And they're taking their rightful place in the spotlight, leading and inspiring the developing queens in all of us. Welcome to the Queen's Lead podcast.
Now here's your host, Amy Singleton, the queen of realness, leading conversations about business, life, and the real shit you want to know.
Welcome everybody back to another episode of the Queen's Lead podcast. I'm your host, Amy Singleton, and today we are joined by Kody Shipe. I met her just a few weeks ago, and I couldn't not bring her on this podcast to tell you guys what she's done. She has pretty much healed herself from a host of autoimmune disorders. Many of you who listen to this podcast know that I have a host of autoimmune disorders that I've also found some recovery through. So I couldn't not take the chance to bring Kody on and have her tell you guys how she's done it. Welcome, Kody.
Thank you so much, Amy. I am so excited to be on this podcast with you today. I really appreciate the opportunity to share my story with you and so many of your followers listening.
That's awesome. We're excited to hear it. So, Kody, tell us about who you are. Where did it all start? Were you born and raised here in Oklahoma too?
Yeah, so I was actually born in Texas, and I lived in Texas for the first 17 years of my life. I moved here when I was a senior in high school, attended college, and then quickly just transitioned into the working world. I have a legal background. I was in the legal field as a paralegal for 10 years, and I've been married. It'll be 10 years this year in September. I have two littles at home, a little boy who'll be 4 in April, and a little girl who'll be is 1.5, around 1.5. So all of this really started about 5 or 6 years ago for me, probably longer than that. Anybody with autoimmunity, it starts way beyond when we realize it's actually starting. But symptoms really began to appear about 5 or 6 years ago when my husband and I decided that we wanted to start family planning. So I got off of birth control, quickly learned that it was not easy for us to get pregnant. We had some infertility issues, and I went to a couple of different doctors. I saw a holistic nurse practitioner, women's health nurse practitioner, and she really helped me begin to regulate my hormones and some of the hormone dysfunction that I had naturally. I'm not anti-medicine. I do need to put a disclaimer in here up front that I'm not anti-medicine. I'm not anti the medical world, but I do prefer to do things holistically if possible. So it took us almost 2 years to get pregnant. I had several different doctors say it'll be highly unlikely that you get pregnant without some form of medical intervention. So about 1.5 years into the process, maybe a little bit longer, I got impatient and I said, just give me the medication. Let's get this ball rolling. I want to have a baby. I was approaching 30 at the time, and I felt like my clock was ticking. So we need to get this going. So we did one round of fertility medication, and it wasn't successful. So my husband and I decided to kind of put things on pause. We were really stressed out. We were facing a lot of different things at the time. My dad was not doing well medically, and he needed a stem cell transplant. I got the call that I was a potential match to be his donor, and you can't be pregnant and do that at the same time. So
isn't there always some kind of plan?
Exactly.
Like a divine plan that's making things happen in the right order. I love that.
Exactly. Yes. So about 6 weeks later, I'm going to be a bit ahead of myself, but I decided to focus on my health. I knew I had polycystic ovarian syndrome. I knew I had hormone imbalance. I knew I had thyroid dysfunction, hypothyroidism. And at the time, I had tested positive for an ANA marker, which is an autoimmune marker blood test. And so we really didn't know what was going on, but I began to have symptoms pop up: extreme fatigue, extreme exhaustion, muscle pain, joint pain, a lot of just different things you wouldn't actually think are a symptom, but they are a symptom.
Yeah.
right? So waking up in the middle of the night with pins and needles in my toes, waking up with hands swollen and stiff and not able to use them. And it really was just getting kind of progressively worse throughout the years. So we decided to focus on our health. I took a holistic approach to working on a hormone imbalance. And in 6 weeks after following an anti-inflammatory diet, after working out, being faithful to some lifestyle changes, surprisingly, we had a positive pregnancy test. So
Wow.
that's how we had our first miracle baby. And then
Yeah.
after that, it was the height of COVID, right? Everybody was shut in, nobody was leaving their house, and things just got crazy with a newborn. And I started making some really poor choices again, food, not working out. Obviously, there's sleep deprivation involved when you have a new baby.
Yeah.
And my symptoms just kept progressing. So by this time, I went to a rheumatologist and I was told there's nothing wrong with you. Good luck. And I
Hmm.
wasn't really happy with that answer. So I went back to my referring physician and I said I didn't have a good experience. She referred me to another doctor. Same case. They just said, you probably have a false positive and there's nothing wrong with you. Good luck. So it really
Hmm.
took 3 rheumatologists before I found one who was willing to sit down, go over my symptoms, look at my lab work, look at my history, and work with me to help find a solution. I
Can we
love
talk about that for just a second? Like
absolutely.
how many, and I'm a nurse by my background. So
Mhm,
I kind of already felt like I knew how to navigate that healthcare system,
mhm.
but it took over 2 years for my diagnosis to finally come to fruition. And it was like you said, it was finally someone's, it was refer you to this doctor. Oh, well, your white count zero. Maybe you need to go to a hematologist. Maybe you're having chest pain, which was pleurisy. You need to go to a cardiologist. You need to go to, and they sent me all over creation and no one was willing to take the time to sit down and listen to me. They looked at the
Mhm.
papers, they looked at the results, right? But like, how are you feeling in getting someone to actually speak with you about that
Mhm.
and take the time is so rare. And I can't believe you
Ab
had to go to 3 different rheumatologists to get someone to take the time to listen.
Absolutely. I cried after every appointment, but the 3rd time was a different time. I cried out tears of joy because I was so relieved that I found someone who was really willing to listen to me. And I
Yeah.
will never forget sitting in that doctor's office and the doctor looking at me saying, "I don't know exactly what's going on with you, but I believe you and we're gonna figure this out."
Oh,
And
oh,
it
the most powerful words in the
yes,
world. I believe
yes,
you and we're going to figure it out together.
yes.
That's so
So
good.
I really love that that doctor was able to, through trial and error, we tested some different medications. I continued to make some lifestyle changes, and really didn't receive a diagnosis. So, Amy, this started back in 2017, 2018. I did not get a
Wow.
diagnosis until the end of 2022 after my daughter
Wow.
was born. I had a massive flare up. I had a severe kidney infection. I developed a kidney stone that had to be surgically removed. And I was not in good shape. I was really, really, really sick. And I looked at my rheumatologist and said, "Do we know what's going on with me yet?" And he
Yeah.
said, "I am confident that you have lupus."
Yeah.
And it was a sigh of relief that I finally had an answer, but also an overwhelming sense of where do I go from here? What do I
Yeah.
do now?
I
And
have
when I
what?
say
Like they gave you a backpack with something that's like yours now, right? Like what do I do
mhm,
with this thing you just told me I have? And how do I carry this in my everyday life? Because I've got like a family and a couple of kids and my fingers can't be, like sausages every day or, all
yes,
those symptoms you've been feeling. How did that feel to I know like what you said, that's so true. It feels like a relief in one way, but on the other hand, you're
mhm,
like, what's just been handed to me?
mhm. Exactly. And um, it was really eye opening for me to know I have something going on. It's not all in my head, because I think people who have autoimmune disorders get to the point
Yes.
where physician after physician and doctor after doctor say, nothing's wrong with you. I don't understand. None of the blood work is coming back abnormal, or they're going through a series of testing where they're just not reaching answers. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that people who deal with autoimmune conditions um, probably fall in one of two camps. It's either I'm going crazy, right? Something,
Yeah.
something
I
is
think that's where
going
we all
on.
start.
Yes. Or we fall into the victim, right? It's the woe is
Mm-hmm.
me. Something is wrong with me. Nobody will listen to me. I don't understand why. And um, I really, at the time when I got my diagnosis, I was relieved, but I fell into that second camp. I began to
Ooh, yeah.
withdraw. I began to cancel plans, reschedule plans.
Mm-hmm.
My pain had gotten so bad where I could not get on the floor and play with my kids. I couldn't go to the park and play with my kids. I didn't want to do anything. I would have to call my husband some days at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, come home and go straight to bed. There are multiple
Mm-hmm.
days where I just sat and cried. I couldn't be present with my kids because of my disease. And that's really, really what kickstarted my journey into health and wellness and healing. I just went through my camera reel last week trying to pull out some pictures for content and realized that the time frame of when my daughter was born in June of 2022 until when my healing journey began, which was really about April 2023, 90% of my pictures were taken on the couch looking
Wow. Yeah.
miserable.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that was very sad for me. I was like,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not active, I'm not present, and I'm not able to provide what they need. At
And
the
I have
same
a question for
time,
you at that
mhm,
time, because at that time, it's like you're telling my story, Kody. And I think you're telling the story of so many people, especially women who are mostly affected by lupus, right? Um,
mhm,
like were you on, I have two questions. Were you on medications at that time from the rheumatologist?
mhm.
And were you engaging in any other kinds of behaviors or habits that you were trying to supplement that relief? Whether, I mean,
Absolutely.
I hear you saying you were withdrawing, you were canceling plans, you were staying on the
Mhm,
couch. For me, I started, I was in all that pain and they had me on so many pills. I
mhm.
knew they were horrible, but like that was a whole cycle. Then I started drinking. Like there were so many things that the medicines weren't working. So I was trying to find my own way to feel better. Like, were you experiencing any of that too?
Absolutely. I was on, before we actually knew it was lupus, I was put on one prescription, Plaquenil. It's very
Mm-hmm.
common for lupus. And
Mm-hmm.
then I was also, after I was diagnosed, dealing with so much pain that I was put on Celebrex as well,
Mm-hmm.
which is just a high-powered NSAID, but it
Mm-hmm.
helps a lot of patients who have rheumatoid arthritis. My
Mm-hmm.
physician also found it helpful for people with lupus, but even on the medication, it still did not completely relieve the symptoms.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And on top of that, sometimes you experience side effects from medications that you need another medication to cover up. And
Right.
so I really,
Yes.
I love the healthcare industry in that it's there and it's available. And I think it has a great purpose for us as individuals. But sometimes people who have autoimmune conditions go to the physician to get better and they get prescribed a medication and then they have a side effect and then there's another medication for that and then a side effect and another medication for that, and like you said,
Yes.
we really become a walking pharmacy of
Yeah.
medications. And
35,
now,
I think was the top number I was on at one
wow,
time. 35.
wow. So a year
Mm-mm.
ago in February, I was on 4 different medications. Today, I'm completely off all of my medication and
Yes.
functioning, living well, pain free, symptom free, and doing great. So, um, in April of 2023, I was miserable. I had a good friend who had been over recently, and her grandmother had an autoimmune disorder, and she was able to, through her whole life, witness her grandmother's struggle, really. And she said, I don't want you to end up in bed every single day. You're not taking care of yourself. You're not doing what you need to do. And I knew it at the time that I needed to be making different choices, but I was in such a dark hole of misery that I didn't know how to get out. And so things that had helped me previously were diet, were exercise, were lifestyle, being counseling, therapy, different activities that really help us engage the nervous system, help us regulate our immune system. And so I started to implement some of those practices again. We had a local gym open about a mile from us that had childcare, and that was huge. I thought, how am I ever going to get to the gym where I can't take my kids with me? And they said, bring your kids. We're here to help you. I started attending the classes every day. I started making drastic lifestyle and diet changes. I went back on an anti-inflammatory. Some people know it as an AIP diet, which is a restriction diet or an elimination diet. And then you slowly begin to reintroduce those back into your food groups, back into your diet to see how your body handles and tolerates it. And I also began to really dig deep into some of the emotional instability or mental instability I was dealing with at the time. I think when you have one child, anything that you want to kind of leave covered, it's a little bit easier to put the mask on to pretend like it's not there than when you have the second kid and you're trying to figure out, how do I help these kids regulate themselves when I'm not even regulated? The lid comes off and all the trauma comes out, and then you have to deal with it. There's no covering it up. There's no hiding it. There's no masking it. And so that was the first time I was exposed to attachment theory. The first time I heard, he's a licensed therapist, and his name is Adam Young. He has a podcast called The Place We Find Ourselves. That's the first time I heard of narrative therapy, attachment therapy, or theory, and also more about nervous system regulation and trauma, how it affects our body. I began to read the book that's by Bessel van der Kolk. It's called The Body Keeps the Score. If you're not familiar with it, it's incredible. And really began to dive deep on researching, where does autoimmune come from and how do I heal this, because I don't want to be this way anymore. So,
and where does it come from? Because you hear so much research, so many experts saying this or that. What did you find? What do you think?
I believe that autoimmune is multifaceted. There are many different root causes. Childhood therapy or childhood traumas. Our standard American diet doesn't help. So inflammation that creates leaky gut, that creates hormone imbalances, that creates toxic liver. Also, there are environmental factors. So we're exposed to toxins everywhere. And then we also have different medical events like estrogenic events. I believe my polycystic ovarian syndrome contributed to that with an elevated estrogen count. And it probably isn't just one thing. It is the combination of multiple things together. So as a health and wellness coach or an autoimmune coach, that's one thing I help my clients understand, is it's not just coming from one source. There are multiple different avenues, and you have to look at it as a whole picture, holistically. And we begin to just chip away at it a little bit at a time.
So what I'm hearing you say is what I already know, but the people listening may not have known. You took this entire experience, left law, left being a paralegal, and went all in on helping others to find the relief and the help that you found, and that you went out and did the work to find for yourself. And what did you do to prepare yourself? Like, first of all, I mean, this is a semi-business podcast, like with leadership and women. So how terrifyingly scary was it to leave that stable job and that career and try to do something on your own?
So I actually left my legal job 5 years ago. It wasn't
Wow.
to open business. It wasn't to transition into what I'm doing now. It was to focus on having a family, but I also could not handle the stress and my health was declining
Mm,
at the
yeah,
time. So I was faced with a decision that I felt like I had to make, that if I
hmm,
continued in the legal field, my health would continue to decline or I
yeah,
could completely switch. When I left the legal field, I did some side jobs. I worked part time for our church. I worked part time for a local ministry, and it was supplemental for our income, but it wasn't necessarily a career by any means.
sure.
And last year, probably in July or August of last year, as I began this journey, I'm a faith person. I was out doing a run, and I was just praying and reflecting on my journey, and I heard the Lord say, "It's time to dream again." And that was the
Mm,
first time that I felt something inside of me come alive and go, "This could potentially be, this could change my life, and this could change so many other people's lives as well." So that is the first step of pursuing autoimmune coaching, functional nutrition. And I sat on it for many months because I knew if I was going to step into this, that it was really a calling that I was supposed to do, not just chasing a fad, not trying to uh, just fill some time, but that it
yeah.
was a passion that I felt like I could make a difference, that I could
Mm,
add value, and that I could provide answers for someone else who were seeking, just like I was seeking a year ago, and be that person to help bridge the gap between all the information that's out there and healing, really.
hmm. Oh my gosh. And what did you have to do to prepare yourself for that coaching? Did you go through a program, like a certification to help lead us crazy people that don't know what's wrong with us into success?
So currently, everything that I am doing has been based off of experience. I
Hmm.
researched and researched and researched. I began to implement all of these different things into my life and found that it worked.
Hmm.
After that, I am going through a certification at the moment for functional nutrition for autoimmune.
Mm.
And I do hope in the future to complete like an NTP, which is a nutritional therapy practitioner, or some form of certification like that. But a lot of what I'm doing is based off of research,
Hmm.
education, and experience. And
Yeah.
that's
The
a
experience piece is the
yes,
biggest thing for me because
yes.
I have